Hi everyone. I'm just going to be talking to you about the drama exam, and this is the second part of the drama exam. Part 2, it requires you to describe and explain a conflict experienced by a character in a live performance you've seen. Now, I would think that the best character for you to be talking about would be Claire from the events that we saw the other evening. Claire certainly experiences a lot of conflict. Now, you could talk about her conflict with another character, the boy. The character and the environment, I'm not so sure that this would apply to Claire, but certainly a character and an idea or a feeling would certainly apply with Claire. So what's really key is that you have a look at describe and explain, because there's two parts to this, and certainly you need to start to do both parts to achieve. Okay, so here's what we've got. This is the question that you're going to be getting, and you can see that there are three parts to the question. Here we go. The first is to identify a conflict experienced by the character. Say what it is. The second part is to describe it, so you would give more detail and say how it plays out. And the third one is to explain how it was communicated using drama aspects. So to explain how this was communicated, you'd be talking about its effect on the audience and how they managed to, how we understood it. And the word drama aspects can refer to drama techniques, or it can refer to drama convention. So things like the chorus would be considered a drama convention. This is the marking schedule that I'll be using, and it's very similar to the marking schedule that be used in the external exam. We have 2 not achieved categories, 2 achieve, 2 merit, and 2 excellence. If you're going to get an achieve, you have to be able to identify and either describe a conflict or explain it. If you want to get a strong achieve, I'd expect you to be able to describe the conflict and explain how it was communicated. If you want a merit, then you need to start looking at some detail. The difference with the merit is that you're going to be quite specific and give specific detail. For a low merit, you could either describe with some detail or explain with some detail. When you get to a higher merit, you'll be expected to describe with some detail and explain with some detail. For excellence, we were expecting you to be able to do it in detail. So that would be a fair amount of support for what you say. So for a low excellence, you could do either or, and for high excellence, you'd be expected to describe and explain in detail. Okay, so this is just looking at Claire and her conflict. Now, I identified 4 ways that Claire felt conflicted. I'm sure you're going to come up with your own. These are my ideas. You may agree with them, you may not. To be honest, we saw a show once, so it's really hard for us to come up with a really in-depth understanding of the play. But let's look at what we came up with. The first I thought of was that the need to know that the perpetrator was mad to make sense of what happened to her. I think that was a really key idea, and came out right at the beginning, was that she just really questioned. She needed to know. It wasn't possible for her that somebody could have done this without being mad. And then the next conflict she has is this kind of conflict of this preoccupation of how she could have stopped him. And she keeps questioning and creating these scenarios in her head, which we see about what she could have done to make it all not happen. Then the third way she's conflicted is she has this need to kill him and to make him suffer for what he has done. But clearly that is quite a conflict for her, because finally when she does it, she actually she knocks the cup out of his hand. So that is another conflict she has. And of course the guilt that she's been unable to rescue her choir and allowed it to happen. So she has internal conflict about this guilt. Now I just took one conflict and I thought I'd do a brainstorm around it with regards to describing it and then explaining in detail. So the first conflict I looked at was the need to know that the perpetrator was mad. And I thought about how did we see that in the... Sorry, I had an interruption. This one is the need to know that the perpetrator was mad, and what she did in order to show us this need to know. And my first observation was the constant pressing of the psychologist for answers, but then he stresses that she should be more concerned about herself, not the boy. Revisiting the event to try and understand what he's made of. The need to know why he's given them a choice. Remember, of the two of them, who was going to be shot with the last bullet. She keeps repeating that as well. And also the conflicts expressed in her final acceptance that he was evil, and we see the animal emerge when he becomes a sort of chimpanzee. So that's how I saw that she was kind of expressing that conflict. And then how it was conveyed in terms of techniques and conventions, I noticed that she was pacing back and forth across the stage with lots of energy, using a large area of space at the beginning. She moved backwards and forwards in front of the choir constantly and kind of turning on her heels. So that suggested her anxiousness. Standing in the position that the boy stood, rocking on her heels, I don't know if you remember, the boy was moving backwards and forwards on his feet, and she does the same thing, as though she's sort of becoming him and suggests her desire to get into his head and to make sense of his actions. She also does a lot of shaking her head from side to side and a lot of agitated movement to suggest her disbelief. She questions the people in his life to find out why he's committed the crime. He talks to we see the actor and the father. We see the father and the friend. The choir itself is a convention that also shows this idea. They ask the boy questions in unison and help us and Claire to understand his state of mind. And another idea that one of you came up with, which was really fabulous, was that the choir was actually acting as a jury, which I thought was a really wonderful idea. Also, we see her aggression when she first talks about the idea of buying the chocolates, and she becomes really angry about the Twix, I think it was. And this is sort of suggesting this conflict that she has. And also having sex with the boy in an effort to kind of almost inhabit his mind and understand his actions. So that was one idea I did a brainstorm for. Then I thought I would try writing an answer for one of the conflicts that I'd identified. Now if we go back, you'll see that, sorry girls, the second one here, the preoccupation with how she could have stopped him. I thought I would answer a question for that, and then you might have some idea of how to go about it. I'm sure you girls will do a lot better than I have, but anyway, describe this conflict. Well, the conflict is obviously the preoccupation of how she could have stopped him. Claire becomes completely obsessed with the event and imagines how she could have stopped him. During this process, she herself falls deeper and deeper into madness, eventually trying to take her own life. Claire creates imaginary scenarios in her head, which she acts out with the boy. The first is a very intimate event. She kneels on the floor, delivering him as a baby, and imagines if she had strangled him at birth. Ironically, Claire's imagination is forcing her to contemplate murder, just as the boy himself did. Then she tells of a partner and her finding him as a teenager and taking him home, that he went to university and he now has a job. She also talks and challenges the character as well as the people who knew him, his father, childhood friend, and leader of the white supremacist party, trying to understand his motivations. What techniques were used to convey this conflict to the audience? Well, techniques and also conventions. And I'm trying to explain how and why here. Initially, Claire expresses her internal conflict by using a large amount of space, pacing back and forth, setting up chairs, speaking to the character, and conducting the choir. Claire has high energy, her body is very upright, and her movements are sharp. Although the audience is not fully aware at this point of what has occurred, Claire's frenzied use of movement and space is indicative of some internal conflict bordering on hysteria and foreshadows the event. Eventually, once the audience is aware of what has occurred, Claire challenges the boy, questioning him. By standing in the same place where he did and rocking on her heels back and forth as he did, it seems as if she has become him in an effort to understand him and how she could have stopped it from happening. However, as Claire begins to imagine more possibilities of what she could have done, she retreats into herself more physically. She hunches over and she moves to the floor. Her lower level and slowed movements suggest that she has become overwhelmed and tired by the events, and that she cannot come to terms with what he did. When she imagines delivering him, her body is bent over and her movements are slow. Finally, when she tries to end her life, her body is heavy and wooden. She hangs off the rescuer's arm, unable to pull herself back, empty of hope. Claire realizes her efforts to stop what he has done are not possible, and that she only has one alternative, to kill him. This brings about renewed energy, but in a more controlled and focused manner. Her actions are more slow and sure. She walks in a more measured way. She approaches the table to make his tea in a calm manner, quietly and deliberately. Once again, she uses more space. She moves right across the stage to the tea urn and back to him. Her questions are more lucid and normal. Her voice is more controlled too. Spelling of two, girls, that's double O. Claire has come to a realization that she needs to take action, and her change in the use of space and movement develops this idea. And you can go on, but there's an idea of how you're being a little bit more, giving a lot more detail, explaining exactly what she does and why she's doing it. So I hope that's given you some idea of how to answer question 2. Good luck.